Hello, and welcome to Show Me History. I'm your host, Amy Blankenship. Called America's Last Little Italy, the Hill neighborhood in St. Louis is an Italian enclave in the southwest portion of the city. As I begin this episode, I'd like to apologize because I'm going to butcher some names and pronunciations. I'm a typical Midwesterner and just can't get my American accent out of the way when pronouncing foreign words, so my apologies. Prior to the development and habitation of the Hill, St. Louis did have an Italian community downtown along Cole Street. This population was largely Italians from Lombardy that migrated in the early 1880s. Mainly grocers and clothing manufacturers, they had very little interaction with the Italian immigrants on the Hill. For most of the existence of both communities, it was an entire day's journey to either. So why didn't the Hill Italians join Little Italy in downtown? The Italians living downtown came to America at a different time. They were different people. They came with some money of their own and were skilled merchants in the old country. The Italian immigrants going to the Hill were here under different circumstances. They lacked the skills necessary to find a job in the city. It was easier for them to find jobs in the mines of the Hill. We'll go more in depth on the topic of Little Italy downtown on another day. Now, on to the Hill. The Hill neighborhood consists of 52 square blocks. It is bounded by Manchester to the north, Columbia and Southwest to the south, Kings Highway Boulevard to the east, and Hampton to the west. Macklin Avenue serves as a residential divider. On the east side are older, narrow homes made of brick that are closely knitted together. The west side features homes built in the 1950s in a bungalow or ranch style. The land that would become the Hill was part of Charles Gratiot's League Square grant from the Spanish Territory governor in 1798. He named the north-south running road Kings Highway and attempted to get support from Spanish government to maintain the 40-foot wide road. The Gratiot family owned the land for 3 generations. They then divided it into 12 east-west sections and sold the land to Mrs. Frances Sublett, Peter Lindell, Henry Shaw, and J.F. Cooper, among others. In the 1850s, the land was referred to as Cheltenham. At this time, the area of the city was basically a no-man's land. Far from the city center, Cheltenham lacked direct transportation. This changed in 1852 when the Pacific Railroad added a stop. In 1853, Etienne Cabet led a group of Icarians to settle in the area. Cabet was a lawyer, politician, and utopian socialist. His group supported state control of all social and economic life. The group purchased 28 acres of land near today's Wilson Avenue, just east of Sulphur. They built a communal center and a cluster of small cabins. By 1865, they had disbanded and left the area due to dissension amongst the group, disease, and financial issues. It was around this time that clay deposits were discovered in the area. Known as fire clay, it's tolerant to high temperatures and perfect for making bricks. The first clay plant appeared in 1842. Soon other companies developed in the area, including Evans and Howard Fire Brick Company in 1855 and the Laclede Christie Fire Clay Company in 1857. A great fire in 1849 had destroyed about 15 blocks of the city, and as a result of this, the city changed building code that all new buildings had to be constructed from brick. So, the area of the Hill became a brick maker not only for St. Louis, but also for the nation. It became a center of industry. At first, the clay mines employed free African Americans, Germans, and Irish. By the time of the first immigrants to settle the land, the area was now called the Fairmont District. The Irish would arrive first, only to give way to Germans. Then finally, Italians who settled on the northernmost part of the Hill. The need for labor and the surge of Italian immigration happened almost simultaneously. Work in the clay mines was hard and dirty. 12-hour days and 6 days a week brought you little pay. The work was piecemeal, and workers were paid by the ton of clay they loaded each day. They had to supply their own pick and shovel. Before the days of OSHA and the standards for safety, workers risked their lives every day. At its peak, the Hill had 11 major companies running clay mines 7 days a week and 24 hours a day. Let's talk about the name The Hill for just a minute. It comes from La Montagna, the mountain in Italian. It refers to the steep grade that workers walked up each day when returning home from the clay mines. Over time and dialect changes and kind of a game of telephone, the mountain became the hill. Early development on the hill was slow, consisting mostly of men. There were very few houses, mainly shacks and boarding houses. The boarding houses would rent the same room to two sets of men working different shifts in the clay mines. The first wave of Italian immigrants mainly consisted of northern Italians, Venetians, Piedmontese, and Lombards. In 1848, a revolution had begun in Italy, the Wars of Independence. Each state or area of Italy was governed separately. Under unification, they became ruled by one central government, and this caused a series of internal wars with surrounding areas and countries to unify and define boundaries. Some of the individual countries would be unified into one Italian nation, where the Kingdom of Sardinia, the Papal States, Kingdom of Lombardy and Venetia, Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, Grand Duchy of Tuscany, Duchy of Parma, and Umbria. The northern states of Italy quickly industrialized, while the south and rural areas remained undeveloped. During this period of turmoil, many Italians immigrated to America, first working on railroads and then moving to other jobs. By 1890, the Hill had 175 men living in 34 rooms. The idea was for men to immigrate first and then send money home to families saving to travel later. The dense male population led to the concept of picture brides. Families in Italy would select a wife for their male heir living in America. Most often, they would have only seen a picture of the bride before her arrival. These women married for survival, and there were not many opportunities for them in Italy. In the late 1890s, Italian immigration continued, causing rapid development of the Hill. Housing numbers increased, but the area still lacked utilities. For the most part, housing was still shanties and tenements. The Hill, located on the western edges of the city, was isolated from the city's core. It lacked connections to gas, water, and electricity. Paved streets, sewers, and streetlights did not exist on the Hill. There are few lines of transportation connecting the Hill to other areas in the city. It was necessary for the people of the Hill to live close to where they worked. More industries took advantage of the space, labor, and proximity to the railroad lines in the Hill. Companies like the Quick Meal Stove Company, Crondelet Foundry, and McQuay North made it possible for the growing population of the Hill to find jobs and still live within their community. The second wave of immigration from 1866 to the turn of the century was the Southern Italians from Sicily and Campania. In 1871, the unification of Italy was complete. This resulted in poor living and working conditions for many Southern Italians. Widespread poverty in the South was a result of centuries-old feudal system that cannot be changed overnight. Even after unification, farmers did not own the land they tended. Overcrowding led the Italian government to encourage young men to immigrate to other countries. At first, many of these men migrated to other European countries to work in the mines. The arrival of Southern Italians to the Hill brought about a culture class. Until the 1848 to 1871 unification, Italy had not been unified as one country since the Roman times. The historical territorial division had been in place for thousands of years. Ancient histories of North and South Italy were influenced by surrounding countries and invaders. Everything about North and South Italians were different. Culture, economy, education levels, geography, dialect, traditions, government, cuisine, types and jobs and skill levels. You name it, they were from different worlds. Northern Italy tended to be more industrial, with wealthier educated people living in urban city-states. The South was agricultural, rural-based, feudal system, with the poor living on lands of the rich. The southern states of Italy were also blamed for issues in an attempt to unify the country as a whole. The Lombards from the north and the Sicilians from the south created a chasm. Lombards and Americans in general looked down on Sicilians. Within the Hill, the two cultures did not interact, and intermarriages were banned. They had separate social and sports clubs. The only thing they did together was attend the same church, St. Ambrose. The tensions between North and South eased with each generation. By the second and third generations, children began attending school together, and there were marriages between Lombards and Sicilians. I'm going to take some time here to talk about the pillar of the community of the Hill, the St. Ambrose School and Church. For years, the Hill did not have a Roman Catholic church. The closest Catholic church was in a nearby German neighborhood, St. Aloysius Gonzaga. In 1903, Reverend Caesar Spagardi of St. Charles Borromeo Church established a mission church in the basement of St. Aloysius. He also headed 2 Italian churches in downtown St. Louis. This was the beginning of St. Ambrose. In time, the newly formed congregation was able to raise enough funds to purchase land and build a church of their own. They purchased a tract of land at Cooper, now Marconi, and Wilson. On August 3, 1903, a frame church was dedicated. In 1915, they purchased land on the corner of Wilson and Hereford for the school and convent. In August of that year, Reverend Luciano Carvati purchased land from Joseph Locastro at 5128 Wilson Avenue. The building on this property serves as a present-day church rectory. In 1921, the original church building had burned down. 600 families pledged to pay $60 over time to rid the church of the debt of the construction of the old building and prepare to build a new building. They would pay $1 a month for 5 years. On May 30th, 1925, the cornerstone was laid for the new church building. Architect Angelo Caruba designed the building and used the Basilica of St. Ambrose in Milan, Italy for inspiration. It cost over $150,000 to construct and held 400 seats. To pay for the construction and components of the church, parishioners could buy elements such as pews, windows, and bricks. Kids would pick their brick and watch it be installed by the stonemasons. After church services, they would meet outside by their brick. 4 of the 5 church bells were donated from former hometowns in Italy. On June 27, 1926, the new building was dedicated. Archbishop John Glidden led the services. The statue, The Italian Immigrants, was installed in 1972. It was designed by Rudolph Torini. The Church of St. Ambrose also contains a school for the neighborhood. St. Ambrose School opened its doors in 1906 to 100 students, 50 boys and 50 girls. Classes were held in 2 rooms. One room was for instruction of the 1st to 4th grade, and the other room served as an auditorium and multi-purpose room. By 1916, the school had over 200 students who were taught by nuns from the Order of St. Teresa. At this time, the St. Louis Archdiocese requested the school to provide education through the 8th grade. The building was not equipped for this, and the school had to turn away students. In 1935, a school board was established. Soon, 2 rooms were added to the building, but it still didn't provide enough room for all the students wishing to attend. In 1949, a new building was constructed. Today, St. Ambrose School provides education for students in kindergarten through 8th grade. Through St. Ambrose Church and School, residents of the Hill began to shed their biases towards one another and become a merged community. No matter the region from Italy your family immigrated from, there's a number of mutual aid societies to help when needed. These societies played a crucial role for the newly arrived. They maintained the native Italian culture and provided welfare for its members. All had close ties to St. Ambrose. The oldest continuing Italian organization in the United States is the Fratellanza. Founded on November 11, 1866, they helped new immigrants adjust. They provided help in the form of employment, housing, assistance, and reduced fees for medical services. Members paid monthly due and were required to attend meetings. It seemed that each region of Italy had its own club and mutual aid society. The Northern Italians had the big club hall at 5200 Shaw Avenue. Officially known as the Northern American Mercantile Company and Cooperative, Big Club Hall was founded in 1895. A mutual aid society and social club, it served as an early police for the Hill. The Hill became an area of community and protection. Newly arriving immigrants could find homes, work, and a sense of belonging there. Around the turn of the century, housing changed to 1-story, 4-room brick houses in the shotgun style. Land plots on the Hill are long and narrow, making the shotgun house ideal. In a shotgun house, all the rooms are in a row and connected. As you enter the front door, you're greeted by the living room, then a bedroom or 2, then a kitchen, and a back door. The bathroom was outside. Just an interesting little tidbit here. Some of the houses on the Hill were constructed from lumber, and material from the 1904 World's Fair. A few residents struck a deal with the city that they would deconstruct the buildings after the fair for no cost if they could keep the materials. More industry took advantage of the natural resources, labor, and space on the hill. Its close proximity to the railroad lines was an added bonus. More jobs permitted the Italian community to stay in the area. They created a boundary from the rest of the city. Everything you could possibly need was found on the hill. Grocers, taverns, confectionaries, bakeries, dry goods, funeral parlors, barbers, drugstores, doctors, everything. And almost all of these businesses were started by a family of mine workers who saved and were able to start their own business. It was a self-sufficient community. I've heard quite a few times that old-timers on the hill have never left the neighborhood. Everything they needed was in walking distance, and there was no need to travel anywhere else. The houses on the hill no longer had to share a common tap or outhouse in the back lot. By the 1920s, streets were paved, and gas and electricity became readily available to homes. In 1924, the city's bus lines began servicing the neighborhood. During this time, the clay mine and stone industries remained a major source of employment, but there began a shift from laborers to merchants and skilled tradesmen. Although large companies still employed the masses, small businesses were started by many Italian immigrants. Grocers, druggists, cobblers, and bakers opened shops with money they had saved by working in the mines. Companies like John Volpe were established during this period and can still be found on the hill today. Another wave of immigration followed the end of World War I. Italy was nearly bankrupt. 650,000 soldiers and as many civilians had perished. The country soon became under control of the fascist dictator Benito Mussolini. He made promises to make Italy a power in Europe and even out discrepancies between the rich and the poor. In 1919, the United States passed the Volstead Act, and Prohibition began. Also known as the National Prohibition Act, it prohibited the production, sale, transportation, and possession of beverages containing 0.5% or greater alcohol by volume. This includes beer, wines, whiskey, and gin. All the good stuff. Families on the hill continued to grow grapes to use for wine and vinegar. This small infraction of the law was mostly overlooked. St. Louis City, downtown, was the epicenter of illegal liquor trade. The situation on the hill was mostly exaggerated by the media. Not to say that they didn't have their fair share of moonshiners. Still to this day exists a complex system of sub-basements and tunnels connecting various houses and businesses. One story is of a wooded lot across the street from a grocery store. Moonshiners would buy supplies from the store, mainly yeast and sugar, and then use the tunnel in the basement of the store to access the wooded lot and store their goods. They would return to the lot at night and use their hidden goods to make moonshine amongst the trees. The real violence from bootlegging occurred in St. Louis downtown, not the hill. The criminals downtown are the ones who intimidated immigrant families and small businesses into paying for their protection. By 1930, the hill had a population of 6,000. It was a young population. Only 88 people were listed as 65 or older. The Great Depression in the 1930s hit St. Louis hard. On a recent trip to the hill, I was told a story about kids jumping on coal cars. They would knock off lumps of coal for the other kids that followed the train to pick up and take home for fuel. Residents of the hill survived by doing what they had always done, tending backyard gardens full of grapes and vegetables. Many people also raised goats, chickens, and rabbits. Let's get a little sidetrack here and talk about the politics of the hill. It was part of the city's old 24th Ward, one of the largest in the nation. It stretched from Oakland Avenue to Kings Highway to Gravois to the city limits. The first political affiliation of the hill was Republican, led by Garagiola. By the 1930s, the hill had become Democratic, as the Democratic Party opposed Prohibition and grew in influence. The Fairmont Democratic Club was a political powerhouse on the hill, established in 1921 by Gene Guladani. Gene was elected 10 times to the State Democratic Committee and 6 times a national delegate. He led the club until 1926 when Midge Berra took over. Berra was the alderman of the 24th Ward and was greatly respected by the residents of the hill. Serving as the ward boss, Berra helped improve the neighborhood and secure jobs for many residents. World War II was a hard time for Italian Americans, as it was for many hyphenated Americans. Nationwide, there was a push for strong American identity. Anyone with ethnic ties was feared, especially someone whose country of origin was one of the Axis powers. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt almost incarcerated Italian Americans like he did with the Japanese Americans being relocated to internment camps in California. Ironically, more Italian Americans served in World War II than men of any other ethnic background in America. Just over 1,000 men from the Hills served abroad. 49 were wounded, 23 passed away, and over a dozen were prisoners of war. St. Ambrose Parish created a newsletter to send to men serving abroad. Each monthly issue featured news from home and updates on where men from the Hill were stationed. Italy lost the war. The economy was devastated, and society was divided. Republic versus monarchy. America saw another significant wave of Italian immigration after the war. As a result, the neighborhood of the Hill began to change. Marriages of second and third generations were to non-Italians who lived outside the Hill. Younger people moved out of the area to new and better housing. And post-war prosperity gave young people opportunities they didn't have before. They could live in newly constructed apartments, obtain higher levels of education, and find a job outside the world of clay mines and industry. The entire city experienced a massive migration from city limits to the county. As young Italians moved out of the neighborhood, non-Italians moved in. In 1942, Little Italy downtown was demolished to make way for public housing projects. Many of these evicted Italian residents moved to the Hill. The 1960s brought threats to the existence of the Hill as an enclave. In 1964, the Improvement Association of the Hill was established. They fought against companies and the city's actions that posed to destroy their neighborhood. Citizens won the fight against building a drive-in movie theater in its heart. The National Lead Company had proposed pouring 40,000 gallons per day of wastewater into the old mine shafts. Luckily, this never panned out. But the biggest threat was the new interstate. Highway 44 was to cut off the northern portion of the neighborhood. The entrance to the neighborhood on Patterson Avenue would be raised. Citizens fought City Hall, the state, and federal government, but lost this battle. The federal government claimed eminent domain and went on with the project. 150 homes were cut off from the rest of the neighborhood by the highway. 98 homes were demolished, and 450 residents were displaced. The Hill no longer was physically connected. Of the remaining homes in the separated section, insurance companies no longer renewed homeowner policies. The area was too difficult for emergency vehicles to reach and service citizens. Northside residents only had a pedestrian bridge to get to church, work, and local businesses. Led by Father Salvador Polizzi, residents of the Hill fought back. They proposed building an overpass to connect the two geographical areas. They pled to city government with no avail. Governor Hearns was no help either. They moved on to the federal government, where residents pledged $50,000 of their own money to build the overpass. At the time, the Secretary of Transportation was John Volpe, an Italian-American. It's said that he was moved by the Hill's sense of community and commitment to keep the neighborhood intact. The federal government agreed to build the overpass, and the Hill was connected once again at the expense of the government. In 1969, Hill 2000 was founded. Father Salvador Polizzi organized area businessmen to discuss plans and revitalize the neighborhood. The city blight was encroaching on the neighborhood on all sides. The group created bylaws and selected a 12-member board. Each member had to live, rent, or own property on the Hill and give $500 to the organization. The purpose was to, quote, to initiate programs and plan effectively and creatively for the future welfare of the area as regards to the continued quality of community life. This will encompass the social, economic, commercial, religious, physical, cultural, and moral welfare of the area of its residents. End quote. The dedication of these residents with its catchy slogans like Price Builds and Don't Move, Improve led to the general improvement of the Hill. Citizens upgraded property exteriors and took pride in their neighborhood again. Organizations bought houses, restored them, and then sold them to families at a low cost. Father Polizzi's goal was to save and preserve the Hill, while so many other American cities were losing their little Italies. Many believe that the Hill would not exist without the efforts of Father Polizzi. The Hill was saved from the counterculture movement of the 1960s and 70s and from the general decline of city neighborhoods. In 1965, the community held its first Hill Day celebration. Originally part of a 200-year citywide anniversary, the tradition continued annually until 1979. Beginning with a parade, the festivities would also include food stands, crafts fairs, music, dancing, and entertainment, a celebration of Italian culture. Today, residents of the Hill celebrate La Fiesta, a smaller version of Hill Day. The Italian Heritage Parade and Festa is held in October of each year. It first began as a celebration of Columbus Day in 1867 by the Fratellanza. We'll just say it first began as a celebration of Columbus Day in 1867. In 1979, the parade moved from downtown to the Hill. Today, the celebration focuses on Italian-American heritage. The parade route starts at Southwest Bank at Southwest and Kings Highway, and it concludes in Berra Park with further celebration, games, food, and music. Throughout its history, the Hills had a variety of social clubs for sports, drama, and music. It boasted athletic clubs for all sports. Bocce ball continues to remain popular. This game dates back to 15th century Italy. The game consists of 2 teams with 4 balls each. A smaller ball, the bacino, is thrown into the court first. The overall objective is to bowl and land closest to the bacino. This is an overly simplified explanation, but should give you an idea of how the game works. It's fiercely competitive, and there are few leagues in the Hill today. Another popular sport on the Hill is soccer. In the 1950 World Cup, 5 people on the USA team were from St. Louis, and 4 of them were from the Hill. The USA team beat England 1-0 in a Group 2 match. Although the team did not win the cup, the game was a significant upset in the competition. Okay, that's enough sports talk for me for now. Let's move on to the Hill's Walk of Fame. Established in 2002, the Walk of Fame celebrates residents who left a significant mark in the community. Each member of the Hall of Fame is commemorated by a bronze plaque on carriage walks or the home of the honored citizen. Some of the celebrated people are Joe Garagiola, Yogi Berra, Jack Buck, Pee Wee Wallace, Charlie Colombo, Rolls Aldani, and Ben Pucci. The 5400 block of Elizabeth Place has been renamed Hall of Fame Place in honor of Yogi Berra and Joe Garagiola. They grew up on the block a few houses apart. Jack Buck also lived on the street for some time. Fun fact, Elizabeth Place is the only street in America where 3 baseball Hall of Famers have resided. Today, the Hill is a thriving neighborhood. The first inhabitants built a protective community based on old world values. They created an isolated life for many. Small communities steeped in culture of old country. No need to step outside the world they created. This feeling can still be felt in the Hill today. There's a renaissance of people moving back home. They want to be immersed in culture and heritage. The Hill brings a sense of a tight-knit community. Quote, "Today, the Hill's Italian influence remains evident in its Italian-American majority population and widespread Italian businesses. Walking through this neighborhood, one cannot fail to notice the plethora of authentic Italian restaurants, shops, and bakeries." End quote. The Hill has over 24 restaurants in less than 1 square mile, mostly Italian, but you can find other types of cuisine too. It has numerous businesses from bakeries to soap companies to antique stores, florists, and markets. The Hill still provides anything one could possibly need. Thank you for joining me today. You can find me at our website, showmehistorystl.com, on Twitter/X at showme_history, and on Facebook at showmehistorystl. Until next time, I'll see you in the loo.